Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning, and today we've got another shell that we've never tested before, but it's from a brand that we have tested a couple shells from recently and seen some great results from, and a lot of you guys have been wanting to see these tested, myself included, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what we can get because this combo should give us a pretty devastating looking pattern. But as for those shells I've got today, I brought out some of these, the Rocky Ridge TSS shells. These ones are the 12 gauge, 3-inch, 2¼ ounce payload of TSS 9-shot, moving about 1,200 feet per second. We've seen several good results from Rocky Ridge shells here recently, so I expect the trend to continue with these, especially through today's setup, which should be a pretty lights out performer. And as for that setup, I brought out my Remington 1187. It's got a 28-inch barrel on it, but for a choke, we've got the Indian Creek 665 constriction in the gun today. We've tested this choke once or twice so far with some very nice looking results, so it should be a pretty good combination for these Rocky Ridge 2¼ ounce 9s. I've definitely got high hopes for our pattern today because it should be pretty devastating. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got the turkey target at 40 yards and the chronograph so we can get our velocity. So let's get you guys a view of that target and see how the Rocky Ridge 2¼ ounce 9s can do through the 1187 and Indian Creek 665. I'm expecting to see a pretty nasty looking pattern, but let's go take our shot and see what it all gives us. Alright, so that shell gave us 1229 through the chrono. The boss claim is 1220. So we're pretty well right on where we're supposed to be from that 28-inch barrel, plus a little bit extra with the length of that choke out the end of the barrel. So we're pretty much right exactly what I would expect to see. And that was definitely a pretty hot loaded shell. But what kind of a pattern did it give us down there at 40? Let's go check it out and see what we got. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and we definitely got some pretty interesting results. We favored just a touch to the left, but that's why we use the backer so we can see our whole pattern, and it's definitely a pretty interesting pattern at that. So first we'll take a look here at our core. I will go ahead and draw the equivalent of a 10-inch circle in editing right there throughout the core so you can see what it looks like. But yeah, that is pretty devastating without a doubt. That middle core area that you see right there on your screen is absolutely going to be a turkey hammer at 40+ yards all day long, no question about it. There's no voids throughout there. It's a nice even spread and you have a lot of pellets within there, so looking very nice there. Now moving out and looking at the whole picture, the pattern is shaped a little bit funky. We definitely have a little bit of a hotter string over off the left edge over here with quite a few flyers around the edges up there at the top and the right and the bottom and stuff, so it's definitely not perfect overall. Now, is it still a devastating performer at 40 yards for a turkey? Yeah, absolutely. But I honestly was expecting it to be a little more even and uniform around the edges. We had a really nice core area that I like to see right there. That's a beautiful hunting pattern throughout the middle. But around the edges, it definitely can be tuned in quite a bit, I would think. I mean, we'll bring you in close. There's a lot of little voids and strings and stuff around the edges that just doesn't really impress me much. So it's kind of a trade-off. You have a fantastic core right there in the middle of your screen, but not a very uniform pattern overall. Now, am I being a little bit picky here? Maybe for some people, because yeah, that is absolutely a very capable pattern that you could go out right now and absolutely crush turkeys with, no question about it. But for being a Rocky Ridge shell and an Indian Creek choke and stuff, I don't know, maybe I was expecting it to be a little more uniform around the edges. So I guess we'll just have to test these through a little bit different choke. Maybe the pattern master might do great with them. Maybe they might like a little more constriction or a little less constriction. This is a 2¼ ounce load rather than something like a 2 ounce. So you do have a little bit more shot, which that extra 1/4 ounce might be those little flyers and strings we see around the edges. So these might do a little better through like a 670 choke, which I do have, and we can definitely try that if that's something you want to see. Either way, it's definitely a great pattern if we look at that middle portion area right there. That's completely devastating. But the edges are not very impressive on it. Ton of flyers and little strings around there and kind of an oblong shape as well, considering we have that little hotter area over to the left. So I don't know. This combination is more than good enough to turkey hunt with, and it's far from a terrible pattern without a doubt. But it's not quite the perfect combination of shell and choke either, I don't think. So we need to do a little more testing and see if we can fine tune them a little bit, because I definitely think we can get a little more even or uniform of a spread than this out of them. So it's a pretty solid pattern, but it's not the perfect combination either. And here's the wad from that shell. definitely pretty standard equipment here. You can see the little scrape marks and the little pinholes and stuff around it. That is not at all unusual for a wad like this going through an Indian Creek choke. This looks very typical for what we usually see from a setup like that, and there's nothing stuck down in there and there's no major damage to it. So I think the wad did about what it was supposed to do for us today, but we can definitely still fine tune it in a little bit better, maybe with a little more open of a choke or a little less of a choke. But the wad seems to have done its typical job for what I would expect it to today. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that pattern right there? I really like that central 12 inches or so right there, just to the left of that bird. That is a very nice hunting pattern all day long, without a doubt. But around those edges, we definitely saw quite a few flyers, some little frayed edges and stuff around there, some stringy stuff, so it wasn't perfect. Is it still absolutely a deadly turkey pattern? Yeah, there's no question about that. But for being a Rocky Ridge shell through an Indian Creek choke, which isn't exactly the cheapest choke out there, I was kind of expecting a little more uniform of a pattern. So I don't know, maybe we're being a little bit picky, but I still think we can tune these in and get a little more out of them. We don't necessarily need a tighter pattern, but I would like to even it up just a little bit around those edges. So I guess leave your thoughts down in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Rocky Ridge 12 gauge shells? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? And what other choke combinations would you like to see us run with these shells? I've got a few in mind, and we can always go up or down a little in constriction if there's something you guys want to see, so let me know all that down below. At the end of the day here, that's far from a terrible pattern. We've seen way worse out of shells that are pretty similarly priced to these at the end of the day, so yeah, that would absolutely still be very capable out on a turkey hunt, but I still think we can squeeze a little more out of them at the same time. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we got the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.